The Mariana Trench is the deepest place on Earth, 36,000 feet straight down. So deep that if you placed Mount Everest at the bottom, it would still be covered by more than a mile of water above it. Humans have visited the surface of the moon more times than we have visited the deepest point of the Mariana Trench. And the few times we did go down there, we found something that made the scientists who saw it refuse to talk about it publicly for years. Before we talk about what lives down there, you need to understand what down there actually means. 36,000 feet. That number means nothing until you put it next to something real. The average commercial airplane flies at 35,000 feet above the ground. The Mariana Trench goes 36,000 feet below the ocean surface, which means if you took the airplane you flew on last vacation and pointed it straight down into the ocean, it would disappear completely before it hit the bottom, with room to spare. The pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is 16,000 pounds per square inch. That is over 1,000 times the normal air pressure you feel sitting in this room right now. If you descended to that depth without protection, your body would not sink. It would not drown. It would be compressed instantly into something unrecognizable before you traveled even a fraction of the distance to the bottom. The temperature sits permanently just above freezing. Zero light has reached that depth in the entire history of Earth. No sunlight, no moonlight, no artificial light of any kind until humans sent a submersible down there for the first time in 1960. And when that submersible reached the bottom and turned on its lights, the first thing the crew saw made one of them immediately reach for his camera. Something was moving. Before anyone had ever sent a camera to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, science was very confident about what was down there. Nothing. That was the official scientific position for most of the 19th and 20th century. The conditions at the bottom of the Mariana Trench were considered so extreme, so hostile, and so completely incompatible with any known form of life that the scientific community reached a consensus that felt completely reasonable at the time. No light, no heat, crushing pressure, near freezing temperature. Nothing could survive those conditions. Nothing had evolved to survive those conditions. The deep-sea floor was essentially a biological desert, vast, empty, and silent. This position was so widely accepted that when a scientist named William Beebe first suggested in the 1930s that complex life might exist in extreme ocean depths, his colleagues publicly ridiculed him, called his ideas unscientific, called them the product of an overactive imagination rather than serious research that he was ignored for 20 years. Then in 1977, a research team sent a submersible to the deep ocean floor near the Galapagos Islands not to look for life, but to study heat vents in the ocean floor. They were geologists. They were looking at rocks. What they found instead ended the debate permanently and made every scientist who had called William Beebe unscientific sit down and go very quiet. The geologists pointed their submersible lights at the ocean floor in 1977 and saw something that made them stop the descent completely. The floor was alive, not slightly alive, not traces of microbial life that required a microscope to detect. Alive in the way a coral reef is alive, covered in creatures, hundreds of species, gathered around cracks in the ocean floor where superheated water was venting upward from deep inside the earth. Creatures that had never been seen, never been described, never been imagined by any biologist who had ever lived. Tube worms 12 feet long growing in dense colonies around the vents. Giant white crabs moving slowly across the floor in complete darkness. Translucent fish with no eyes drifting through water that should have killed them. Shrimp clustered in masses so thick they covered entire sections of ocean floor like a living carpet. None of them needed sunlight. None of them needed oxygen from the surface. None of them were connected in any way to the food chain that every other living thing on Earth depends on. They were running on an entirely different system. A system science had never seen before and had no name for. Scientists called it chemosynthesis. Instead of using sunlight to produce energy the way every plant and most life on Earth does, these creatures were using the chemical energy from hydrogen sulfide gas venting from the ocean floor. Toxic gas, the same gas that kills humans in industrial accidents. These creatures were eating it, living on it, thriving on it in conditions that would kill every other known form of life on the planet within seconds. And that was just what lived around the vents that end the deepest layer of the Mariana Trench itself, in the places where even the vent creatures cannot survive. Something else was there. Something that had no business existing at 36,000 feet of pressure and near zero temperature. Something that moved with purpose through water that should have crushed it flat. Something that science still does not have a complete explanation for. The creatures were not what terrified the scientists. The sound were at in 1997, the same underwater microphone network that recorded the bloop picked up something else coming from the direction of the Mariana Trench. Not one sound, a series of sounds. Low frequency, repeating, structured. The kind of structure that does not come from geological activity. The kind of structure that does not come from water movement or tectonic shifts or any known physical process that happens on the ocean floor. The kind of structure that comes from something producing the sound deliberately. Scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded these sounds over a period of several months. They ran every analysis available. They compared the frequency patterns against every known deep-sea species, against every known geological event, against every known ocean phenomenon. Nothing matched. The sounds did not correspond to anything in any database science had built in over 100 years of ocean research, but that was not the part that made the lead researcher on the project refuse to speculate publicly about what was producing them. The part that did that was the movement. The sounds were not coming from the same location each time they were recorded. They were moving, slowly, deliberately, covering distances across the Mariana Trench floor that no known geological event could cover. No vent activity, no tectonic shift, no underwater current. Only something alive moves through water with that kind of consistency and that kind of pattern. Scientists who reviewed the data privately described the movement pattern as the most unsettling data set they had ever been asked to analyze. Not because it proved something impossible was down there, because it suggested something was down there that was large enough to be tracked by sound across miles of ocean floor, in complete darkness. At 36,000 feet of pressure, in conditions that should make movement itself impossible. And it was moving toward the microphones. Here is what makes everything you just heard impossible. Not difficult. Not unlikely. Impossible. The pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is 16,000 pounds per square inch. To understand what that actually means to a living body, consider this. The pressure at that depth is equivalent to having 50 jumbo jet aircraft stacked directly on top of a single human hand. Every cell in a human body would rupture simultaneously. Every organ would collapse. Every bone would compress into powder. The process would take less than 1 second, and there would be nothing recognizable remaining afterward. And yet things live there. Not simple things. Not single-cell organisms clinging to existence at the absolute limit of what biology allows. Complex things. Things with eyes. Things with nervous systems. Things with behaviors that suggest awareness of their environment. Things that move with purpose through water that should make movement physically impossible. The cell walls of deep-sea Mariana Trench creatures contain a compound called piezoite. This compound does something that no human engineering has ever successfully replicated in any laboratory anywhere on Earth. It stabilizes cell structure under pressure that would destroy any other known biological material instantly. It does not just resist the pressure. It uses the pressure. The deeper these creatures go, the more efficiently their cells function. Pressure that would kill everything else on Earth makes them work better. Scientists have been studying piezolites since their discovery in 2001. 24 years later, they still cannot fully explain how the compound works at a molecular level. They cannot synthesize it artificially. They cannot replicate its effects in any material they have ever created. An animal living at the bottom of the deepest place on Earth has solved a biological engineering problem that the entire combined resources of human science have failed to solve in over 2 decades of trying. That we have mapped less than 20% of the Mariana Trench floor. Less than 20%. The sounds recorded in 1997 have never been fully explained. The movement patterns in the data have never been attributed to any known species. The piezoite compound that allows life to exist at those depths has never been successfully replicated in any laboratory on Earth. And every single time humans have sent a camera to the deepest layer of the Mariana Trench, they have found something that was not supposed to be there. Not once. Every single time that IN 2012 filmmaker James Cameron descended to the deepest point alone, in a specially built submersible. He spent 3 hours at the bottom. When he surfaced, he gave interviews about what he saw down there. He described the experience as profoundly lonely, completely silent, and deeply unsettling. In a way, he said he could not fully put into words that he has never gone back. The Mariana Trench is 36,000 feet deep. We have explored the bottom for a combined total of less than 6 hours in all of human history. Whatever is producing those sounds, whatever is moving across that floor in complete darkness at 16,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, whatever has solved biological problems that human science cannot solve after 2 decades of trying, that IT has had the entire trench to itself for the other 4 billion years.